Now, here's George Roberts.
We're in Wayne County in a place called Boyds Mills, an area just outside of Honesdale. Joining me is George Brown, who is Executive Director of Boyds Mills. Not the village, though.
Correct.
Okay, so let's tell everybody who you are in case they don't know who you are and what you do.
Sure. So my name's George Brown. I'm the Executive Director of Boyds Mills. We are a literary arts retreat center, and our focus is on storytellers thinking about creating stories for children.
Okay.
The long story, the short story. My great-grandparents started Highlights magazine. This is the family homestead. It's been part of our family since the late 1800s. They started Highlights magazine here and then moved those editorial offices to Honesdale. Since the late 1990s, early 2000s, we've been hosting adults here who are thinking about creating stories for children.
Okay.
So Boyds Mills is a literary arts nonprofit, and we're focused on teaching storytellers how to create those stories that they want to get into the hands of children.
The Highlights magazine is such an iconic magazine. How was it for you growing up surrounded by this?
Yeah. So I like to say I'm a Highlights kid through and through, right? And so my father was the editor of Highlights magazine back in the early 1980s when I would have been 6, 7 years old. And I just thought that was the neatest thing, that this is something my great-grandparents started, this is something my dad works at. And I also spent, after school, I would take the bus and get off at the offices at Highlights. So I had a lot of time there. And ever since, I remember a young age, being maybe 8 years old, thinking someday I want to work for Highlights. Mm-hmm. And so I've put my whole career, now I just turned 50 last week, so put my whole career into being a part of Highlights. I worked with Highlights, the company, I worked in editorial for a while, and then over time got involved with our nonprofit. And so I've been working with the nonprofit here for the last 10 years.
This is a fabulous property. You have a lot of things right here that your company owns. What's your earliest recollections of being on the Boyds Mills property?
Yeah, so I remember when I was a kid, the chicken coop, which was the bunkhouse when I was a kid. It's now an art studio and where artists can go in and make art. But when I was a kid, it was a bunkhouse, and when my cousins would come to town, we got to stay in the bunkhouse there, and we'd play Monopoly and drink Sprite or Orange Crush soda or something like that. But it was just such a great time to be with my cousins and feel like we had our own space. So those are some of the earliest memories of being here.
And what's that chicken coop being used for today?
So today it's our art studio. We call it the Jerome Wiseman Art Studio, and it's full of art supplies. And so artists, illustrators who are doing the pictures for books, creating the stories, come here, and they'll often go into the art studio and spend time in there creating something great for their next project.
So let's talk a little bit more about what happens here on the property then. The people that come here to be storytellers, authors,
Sure.
They're looking at children's books, correct? Mm-hmm. What age groups are they typically targeting?
So, and we target, we're thinking from birth to age 18, and so we'll have classes that teach you how to create a picture book or how to do poetry. We talk about middle grade novels for the 4th to 6th graders, and then we'll talk about young adult novels for the middle and high school students. So some of what we do is we actually teach courses. Right, so if you were to Google, how do I write a book for kids, eventually Boyds Mills is going to come up in your search and you'll see the offerings. We have online offerings as well as our courses here. And then a lot of people just are saying, I need a cabin in the woods to create my story. And they'll come here and they'll do independent work on a personal retreat, and they'll work on that story.
Right. I saw you have cabins here that they can stay at, or the lodge, they can stay there. So it creates quite an atmosphere, I think, of being able to get into what you're trying to achieve here, and that is, telling stories, becoming an author.
Right. So our mission is positively impact children by amplifying the voices of storytellers. Our customers are the storytellers, but we're really thinking about that end product of the reader, the child who's reading that book, right? And so you can imagine, I love to think about the young child on a parent's lap or a grandparent's lap and flipping through the pages of a picture book, and where that child is wanting to have some wonder and some delight, right? We talk about this concept in picture books called the page turn. So when you're creating a story for children, you actually want to think about how your sentence ends before you turn the page, because you want to have enough kind of momentum that the child wants to have that page turned, and then that next page reveals what's coming next in the story.
Wow, that's interesting.
And so, you know, a lot of people say, I want to write a book for kids, and then they say, oh, it's probably not that hard. And what's interesting is a picture book can be 500 words, 800 words, but it can be painstaking to get the words just right and to get that page turned just right, because you really need to engage a child in order for them to be excited enough to want to go through and get to the end of the book. We just think about stories for children, and whether it's a picture book or a middle grade or a young adult novel or it's poetry, it's kind of all genres, and then it's all skill levels. And what we really like to think about is, no matter where you are on your storytelling journey, whether you're just starting or whether this is your 10th book you're working on, everyone here is collegiate and feels like they're a part of a community, and they're sharing at the meal times. And so there's no competition of I write better than you, I write more than you. Everyone's really helping everybody, and it's a real community feeling.
I would imagine that being here, being around people that can teach, and then your peers, it's got to be better than trying to take a course online.
Oh, for sure. And so, you know, out of COVID, we built quite an online business, and people are taking our classes online. If they can't get here, it's quicker and easier. And so a lot of our online learning is kind of short bursts to help people get started. But we hope that eventually people will find their way to Boyds Mills, because you're right, there's a magic to be had here. It's this natural surrounding, the food is incredible, the setting and the quiet. And so people tell us over and over again, I got more work done here than I could possibly get done in 6 months at home.
I'm with George Brown, Executive Director at Boyds Mills. Boyds Mills Foundation, associated with Highlights magazine. If you've ever seen this magazine, I'm sure you have. It's been around since 1946. George, what's the relationship between Boyds Mills and the Highlights magazine?
Sure. So Highlights for Children is a family-owned company. My great-grandparents started it. They started with this magazine called Highlights. Today we're celebrating 80 years of Highlights. Highlights is now an expanded organization with books and magazines and multimedia products. And that's the highlights that most people know and see and recognize. Right. About 40 years ago, my father was the editor of Highlights, and he decided to host a retreat for people wanting to write stories for children. Okay. And out of that eventually developed what was the Highlights Foundation, and now since we've changed our name to Boyds Mills. But Boyds Mills is my great-grandparents' family homestead. It's the place where my family still comes to gather. And so we think of three parts. We think of Highlights, the company that's creating these great products for kids. We think of Boyds Mills, which is this literary arts nonprofit, which is teaching adults how to write stories, not for Highlights, but for the entire publishing world. And so most of the writers coming here are not thinking about writing stories for Highlights so much as they are working on books that you'll wind up seeing in Barnes & Noble or your local bookstore. And then there's this family property and the nonprofit. And so the nonprofit runs here, hosts our retreats, and we are renting this property from the family that owns the whole piece of it. And we use that almost year round.
You seem to be in the middle of nowhere, but we're just outside of Holmesdale. We're not that far, a few miles outside, but this is, you know, you come out here and it's very rural, and it's just, you know, you begin to forget your troubles when you're out here. Boyds Mills, give us a brief history of what this place used to be.
Sure, and it's funny because it is kind of in the middle of nowhere, but it was a center of commerce in the late 1800s. So my ancestors came to this place in 1867. T.Y. and Betsy Boyd partnered with Joseph Wood, and they had the Wood and Boyd Company, and they were loggers, and they had a sawmill, and so they would cut the land for the farmers in the area, and they would either saw the logs here in the mill along this Calkins Creek, or they would actually float them down the river, and then it's only about 10 miles to Narrowsburg, where the Delaware River is, and then they would tie these logs together and float them right down to Philadelphia. So it would be quite a big deal to imagine floating these logs down the river all the way to Philadelphia, and then it'd take them 7 days to walk back up and do it all over again.
That's how they did it.
So originally it was a kind of a logging operation, and this was a general store that we're in now, and it was the post office, and there was a blacksmith shop across the creek. And so this would have been the center of town where people would come in and get their mail and get their groceries and have their conversations. And so it's pretty fun for me that this is now my office space. And to think that we've got 150 plus years of kind of family history in this area, and that we're still finding ways to use this space and use this area to do the work we do.
Tell us a little bit about the retreat center. What do you think makes it different than any other types of retreat centers in the U.S.?
Sure, and I think like a lot of retreat centers, you'll see maybe it's a yoga or a wellness retreat center, and our focus is solely on creating stories for children. And so we are the only kind of year-round retreat center for storytellers, specifically creating stories for children. We have a couple others. There's a friend who has a place in Austin, Texas, the Writing Barn, and we have our friends at Milkwood up in New York State that run a great summer program. And then we have this year-round operation here. But it's quite unique because we're really focused on people creating stories for children, and that's a real niche. I don't know if you've ever been to a cocktail party where when someone says, I write stories for kids, often the response is, oh, that's a great idea, I'll do that someday. But it never actually happens, right? It's a lot harder than you think.
Sure.
And so while it seems simple how to create a story for children, it actually takes as much effort as it does to figure out how to run a great TV company, right?
Sure.
Like there's a lot of effort that goes into it. So
if you want to do it right, you have to really know how to
do
do
the
it.
study.
Yeah, you got to know the rules if you want to play the game, right?
And so when somebody says, I want to write a book for kids, the first advice we always give is go to the library and read 100 picture books or read 100 middle grade novels. Sure. And so through that, that's the beginning of your study, is actually seeing what's out there and how it's crafted. And that then helps you start to think about how you might write your story.
How has things changed here over the decades?
Originally, we did one workshop a year. That was in Chautauqua, New York, which is a beautiful arts institution. And then over time, we said, well, let's try to host a few small workshops here at my great-grandparents' home. And that was before we had the barn. So we would have workshops with just 6 or 8 people, because that's all that would fit around great-grandma's dining room table. But they would sit in the living room and have their courses for 3 or 4 days. And then 15 years ago, we built the barn, which is our conference center. So that's where we can provide meal service and have classroom space. And that's allowed us to become more full-time, and we can host workshops of up to 30 people. So now we have a full seasonal schedule of workshops, whether it's picture books or poetry, novels, chapter books, kind of every topic and genre. We're hosting those retreats here.
We're in Boyds Mills, just outside of Honesdale in Wayne County, and with me is Executive Director George Brown. Let's talk a little bit about Highlights for Children, the magazine itself. What do you think makes this different than any other children's magazine that's out there?
Yeah, so, I'm biased. This is our family business. My great-grandparents started Highlights. I spent a number of years working at Highlights in their editorial offices before transitioning to Boyds Mills here, our literary arts nonprofit. But I think the thing my great-grandparents always thought about, and they coined the idea of fun with a purpose. So you have to have this interactivity of fun that's engaging with children, but a little bit of purpose too, right? So you want the child to be challenged enough that it pushes them, but not so much that it kind of drives them away. And so fun was one way to do that. And when you look at highlights today, I'm always amazed at what a great job the editors do to come up with such a variety of topics, formats, and just the way that they're really connecting with children. I often hear, I'll run into someone like you on the street and they'll say, "Oh, you're related to the Highlights family. I used to love that. Is that still around?" Of course it's still around. We're celebrating 80 years. And turns out it's as modern and contemporary today as it was when you were a child. Right? So the magazine and the entire Highlights company has continued to evolve and to continue to keep up with kids today and what's most important for them.
Your family never accepted advertising for the magazine. There's no advertising in this.
That was one of the big sticking points back in the early days. They wanted to have a subscription and they didn't want to rely on advertising, and they also didn't want to overly influence children. They wanted to be able to feel like you could hand this to your child and they could read it on their own or go through it without then having that conflict of seeing an advertisement and saying, "Daddy, I want this," and just have that pure joy of having that in there. Yeah.
Now, your grandparents had worked with another children's publication before Highlights.
Correct? Yeah. So my great-grandparents, they were parenting experts in the 30s and 40s. My great-grandfather, he wrote a column called The Parent Problem that was like the Dear Abby for parenting back in the day, and that was syndicated across the country. And then they worked for an organization called Children's Activities. And the story we like to tell is they would drive around the countryside and they would stop at schools and PTA meetings and they would give talks on parenting, best practices of the time. But they often would talk about what they would do differently if they had their own magazine. So they must not have had full editorial say in children's activities. But somehow they got found out that they were thinking about that. And so right before they were going on to give a speech one night, they got a telegram that said, "I hear you're going to do something different, you're fired." And so that kind of pushed them to actually start Highlights. And so
but it wasn't an easy go at first.
No, not at all.
Right, there was some, wasn't sure if it was actually going to make it.
Yeah, so my great-grandparents, they had a great idea. They were great on the creativity and the thoughtfulness of creating for children, but the business planning was harder. This was 1946 when they started. By the late 1940s, they had pretty much run out of money. And their son actually took a break from his job. He was an engineer designing helicopters. He took a break to try to help them close it down. And he fell in love with the company. And he had a lot of hard work and some good luck and found some investors that could put up enough money to get that next issue of Highlights printed. And sure enough, little bits at a time, that was Garry and his wife Mary came and worked full-time with Highlights. And through the 1950s, they really pushed hard and were able to keep the company afloat and make it work.
Yeah, I think a genius idea was putting it in doctors' and dentists' offices. And the kids would, come in those places and they'd pick up the magazine and of course they'd want to get it to at their home.
And so there were two big ideas in the 1950s. One was this idea of let's place it in the doctor's and dentist's office. And so not only did it become a comforting friend for a child going into the doctor's office who maybe was a little timid of what might be coming with the visit to the doctor, but it had those subscription cards in it and parents would tear those out and fill those out. The other piece was called the School Introductory Offer Program. And so they would get teachers to have sample copies of Highlights and send it home to the kids' parents and ask the parents to consider a subscription. And those two programs, it was fascinating, they both started in the 1950s with Garry and Mary as they were going through this whole piece to try to save the company. They still almost they still exist in some way today. And it's hard to imagine how often a marketing idea can last 80 years.
So the center here, as we discussed earlier, teaching people to write children's novels, books, things like that. Any success story you'd like to share with us?
Oh, I love success stories. Yeah, for sure. And so one of the things we have a great scholarship program, and through donations and grant funding, we were able to provide over $100,000 in scholarships for storytellers to attend our programs this year. And this year in our barn, which we'll see, the art wall is a story called Woods and Words. And that's a success story. Sarah Ackerman, who wrote that book, she workshopped that while she was here 2 or 3 years ago as a scholarship recipient at our summer camp workshop. And sure enough, that book is now published and it's out there in the world.
What do you see in the next 20 years for Boyds Mills?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. We're continuing to look at how stories evolve and how to serve storytellers, and so through our online offerings we can see opportunities to serve storytellers beyond this physical space. But a lot of what we're working on in this physical space right now is just making it more accessible. We put in some new pathways last year and we're continuing that through our community giving this year, just making it easier for people to get around campus.
Anybody watching never heard of you, never heard of Boyds Mills, never heard of Highlights magazine. What would you like them to take away from our conversation today?
We have this unique nonprofit that's thinking about creating stories for children, and it's hard to understand why that's important until you start to pull back the lens and say, if you think about literacy and learning to read and how valuable reading is for children, then what we do in helping storytellers get stories that kids actually want to engage with is pretty important to what happens in society. I think the other is this belief that children are the world's most important people. And that was kind of a thing that my great-grandparents had when they started Highlights, and that has continued to be kind of a generational mantra for our family. And so I am only one of about 100 descendants of my great-grandparents who are all committed to this mission of thinking that children are the world's most important people. It just so happens that my day job is working on this nonprofit that's deeply involved with this mission to positively impact children.
George, wish you a lot of luck with
Thanks,
everything.
George.
Thanks so much for being on the program.
Been wonderful.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.